Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Axelar Learn. My name is Stephen Fluin, and I'm very excited for today's session, although it's going to be a little bit shorter than normal. We have a fantastic presentation from one of the engineers at Axelar here. We're talking a little bit about a sandbox that we've built. And this sandbox is really interesting because for me, when I test applications that are being built cross-chain, there's a lot of complexity, right? Whether you have all these different chains that are possibly even built using different languages, all these sorts of things, there's a lot to worry about. There's a lot to think about. And you've got all these different nodes and hosts and gateways and things like that. And this is a lot of conceptual overhead. And so I'm really excited today to be talking about a really cool new product that we have in alpha that is really trying to help fix this. And so I'm going to hand it off to Vlad to talk a little bit about what we've got today.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Hey, everyone. Vlad from Axelar here. And in this session, we're going to, as Stephen said, talk a bit about our new tool called the Axelar Sandbox. So the documentation for that tool can be found in our docs in the Axelar Sandbox section. You have a link to the Axelar Sandbox called the xchainbox.axelar.dev that you can access. And you have a how to use section here where we have a nice documentation that explains what it is and basically how to use it, right? So let's jump into that Axelar code sandbox so you can see it here. It's still in alpha, so we are constantly improving that sandbox. But basically what you have is that you have 4 screens, and it looks quite small because I zoomed in so you guys can see everything. Here in that part of the screen, we have the smart contract. So in that case, we have the smart contract on the source chain and the smart contract that will be deployed on the destination chain. And this sandbox allows you to test the general message passing examples, so GMP examples. So instead of having to go ahead and create a project and have to configure the Axelar local development environment and write all that in a project on your computer, you can really quickly test your cross-chain application in the browser thanks to that tool. So on the right here, we have a JavaScript kind of console. You can write any JavaScript code. The only difference here is that this window has some global variables injected that you can use to interact with the Axelar Sandbox. And here it has ethers.js injected, so it's a famous library to interact with EVM chains. We have the chains, the contracts, and the contracts will be pointing to the contracts that are here, and the signer and all other kind of enums that you can use to basically facilitate your testing and your prototyping. And all that can be found in our documentation here in the how to use section. We list all the structures that you can use in the contract in the sandbox. So you see that we have 5 chains that you can use to play around, and we have the predefined APIs that you can use that are proper to Axelar. So to use this sandbox, all you need to do is to select the examples that you want to run. So here we have a couple of examples. We have Hello World example, an airdrop example. So Hello World is basically using the call contract with token GMP call. So it basically allows you to call from the source chain a function on the destination chain. The airdrop example does pretty much the same, but on top of that, it allows to transfer tokens. And the ping pong example is an example where the source chain calls the destination chain and the destination chain calls back the source chain. And if you want to get started and start to prototype, we suggest using the get started example. And basically that will clear most of the code here, and you will be able to, let me go here. You'll be able to prototype your code with a clean contract on the source chain and a clean contract on the destination chain, and that's it. So to run the examples, you can select the example that you want to run. So for instance, Hello World, and click on the execute button here. So basically what it's going to do is that it's going to deploy the contracts, message sender and message receiver, and it's going to run that JavaScript, right? So let's execute that to see what will happen. And we see some logging here. We see that the sender contract has been deployed. The receiver contract has been deployed. Then we set, it's basically here in that example, it's basically a setter contract. We set a value on the source chain, and that value is transmitted to the destination chain by Axelar. And the value here is hello world. And we basically see that hello world is set from Moonbeam to Avalanche, and that value is received here on Avalanche. And the nice thing about that sandbox is that you can see all the transactions here. So you basically see what happened here on the cross-chain application. We see that we have created a contract on Avalanche. We have created a contract on Moonbeam from your wallet. Then we have interacted with Moonbeam from your wallet and with the message sender contract, and we call that a function set remote value, which is here. And that function is going to pay the gas receiver. So Axelar will forward your call to the destination chain, and you don't have to call the function, the callback function on the destination chain, and then you do the call contract. And this is what's being called, and we can even see what values have been provided to the function. You see that we want Axelar to contact Avalanche on that destination address, which is the smart contract, a receiver smart contract, and the value here is hello world. And we also see that the Axelar Sandbox execute that the function that needs to be called. And if you are using Axelar, you need to have a execute function in the receiver contract, and that function is going to receive the call from the Axelar relayer. So this is the payload that is passed from the source chain, and it also passes the metadata, for instance, from which chain the cross-chain call has been called and from which address. And this is what is happening here. The execute function has been called, and you see that we have contacted that function from Moonbeam from that source address that corresponds to our message sender contract. And this is a payload, of course, encoded in ABI. And on the destination chain, this is decoded as a string here and set to that value that is stored here. So we are constantly adding new examples to that sandbox. And you can either run the examples in a simulated mode or in testnet. We recommend really prototyping in simulated mode. And when you want to test on testnet, you can just click here, and the flow will be very similar, except that it will ask you to connect to MetaMask here, so you can actually go and deploy those contracts on the chain that you want to specify here in the JavaScript console. So yeah, that's all about the sandbox. Steven, do you have any questions regarding the sandbox?
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things that you said there is that this, by kind of default, operates in entirely simulated mode, and so it's not actually doing any transactions on those chains. When you switch into a more testnet mode, are you automatically swapping out all of the addresses and contract addresses and things like that?
So when we switch to testnet mode, all the contract needs to be redeployed. So for instance, if I switch here to testnet, I want to run the hello world example, and I execute it. And here I think I have my MetaMask connected. What it's going to do is that it's going to compile the contract. So it's going to run the example pretty much and prompt me to go on that Avalanche testnet chain. And it will ask me my confirmation to deploy those contracts on the testnet, which I'm not going to do here. But if you want, you could. So the sandbox is a nice tool that you can use to prototype, right? It's really made for that, for quick prototyping. I would say that if you plan to deploy on testnet or mainnet, you would go and create a hard hat project or a truffle project and use the traditional pipeline. But this tool is very nice, so we can quickly test your cross-chain application without actually having to create a project.
And I want to dig into that a little bit more. So you've got this transition from this sandbox environment into a traditional environment with a framework. How do you recommend that developers follow that path? Like if I've built something cool that like is really cool here, and I've seen how it works and the end-to-end kind of flow, how do I transition?
Yeah, so when you want to transition and create a project like on your computer, we have a couple of tools that you can use. The first one is the Axelar local development. That is actually used by our Axelar local GMP examples repository. So we have a couple of examples here in that repository, some web examples with a UI and some CLI, so command line interface examples. And those examples, we have already kind of illustrated them in previous videos. But here you see a call contract example with a executable sample. And basically under the hood, when you run those local GMP examples, it uses our repository called local development, actual local dev. So basically, it allows you to spawn EVM chains very, very quickly, and it allows you to fund them with tokens and fund your accounts with tokens without having to actually go and deploy all those ERC tokens that you might need. So I would say the first step would be to prototype something in the sandbox, so you at least have an idea of how it should work. Then you would create a local project, and you would probably use something like a local development environment that can also be connected to a testnet. And we have a video about that, how to switch to testnet with that local development environment. And I would take it from there. So the flow would be very similar to the traditional smart contract development flow. You would use tools like Hardhat or Truffle to organize your smart contract. It's just that they would be deployed on several chains at once. And the only, I would say, specificity is that if you want Axelar to call a specific smart contract on a given chain that we support, and as a reminder, the chains that we support can be found in the resources and by networks. So mainnet, the chains that we support for EVMs are those chains. So GMP is supported in those chains. So the only requirements is that you should extend your smart contract from the Axelar executable interface. So you should implement that interface, which has the _execute function that Axelar know it needs to call, and it's kind of a callback that is called by Axelar when you implement cross-chain applications.
Awesome, makes a lot of sense. I'm just curious, where did the idea for the sandbox come from?
The idea came from the team. We noticed that people had troubles to quickly test something cross-chain, to quickly prototype an idea, and we thought that it would be a good idea to actually cut the barrier of entry to that cross-chain ecosystem and make a tool that developers can use. Obviously, this tool is still in alpha. There's a lot of work to do, but we're moving towards that direction. And for instance, one of the cool features that we want to add is that more examples here. We definitely want to have more examples. And we want to improve the UI. And if you have any feedback regarding the UI or the functionality of that sandbox, it's very welcome, and we're going to improve it accordingly.
And so, is this project currently open source, or where should people ask questions and give feedback?
Probably the easiest way would be on our Discord. We have a developer Discord. Developer channel on the Discord, on the Axelar Discord, that people can use. I need to check if it's open source. I'll check it a bit later, but I'm not sure if it's actually open source at this point.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for showing off this fantastic tool. I have not seen a tool that really covers and simulates this idea of cross-chain before. And so kind of seeing both the transactions and the outputs, it's almost a magical experience.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.